Now, I want you to listen to this. We've talked about this before. This is part of the Obama fundamental transformation of America into a third world banana republic. CNS News, here's the headline. HUD mandates affordable housing in affluent Baltimore suburbs. Remember we talked about how Obama is nationalizing the suburbs? We had Stanley Kurtz on here from National Review, an expert on this issue. Well, it's actually happening right now. The Obama administration has started its push to expand low-income housing into higher opportunity areas, quote-unquote. The Department of Housing and Urban Development why does this department exist? Why hasn't this department been abolished yet? HUD last week announced a landmark settlement agreement with Baltimore County that will serve as a catalyst to, quote, promote housing mobility, unquote, and, quote, address residential segregation. By the way, it's residential segregation not based on race, based on income. So now income is discriminatory. So now deciding where to live based on what you can afford is discriminatory. The goal is to move low and very low income people out of the city and into the suburbs. Every person deserves a fair shot at opportunity, and that starts with a decent, safe, affordable place to call home, HUD Secretary Julian Castro said. Bullcrap. It starts with getting off your ass and getting a job. And then if you don't like your job and you don't like the pay, you get another job. Or you work your way up the ladder. It's called building a career. And if you don't like that, you start your own business. It's called entrepreneurship. HUD. Not this iron-fisted social engineering to which there's no damn end. This is what I mean. This is what I mean about squandering a Republican primary season so we can bring more of these nut jobs into the government. Let me go on. Julian Castro, aptly named, you creep, HUD Secretary. This agreement sets Baltimore County on a path to stronger, more inclusive communities where everyone can enjoy equal access to opportunity. It's not about enjoying equal access to opportunity. It's about working hard, saving, and then buying something. Our culture, ladies and gentlemen, is going to hell. It's rotting. It's rotting. The agreement stems from a complaint filed with HUD in 2011 by the Baltimore County branch of the NAACP. Let me tell you how this works. I call it the inside-outside job. The people on the inside in government work with the people on the outside, these leftist groups. These leftist groups bring lawsuits. It happens with the environmental groups all the time. They sit down with their counterparts in government who have similar or identical ideologies, leftists, and they work out a deal. So it gets the federal government's imprimatur, you pay for it, and the plaintiff wins. So there's really nobody representing us, the taxpayer, or defending the Constitution. To settle that complaint, HUD is requiring Baltimore County to spend $30 million, $3 million annually for 10 years, to create 1,000 affordable housing units, either through new construction or rehabilitation. Public housing, we used to call it. The units will be geographically dispersed in, quote, neighborhoods that provide access to opportunity, unquote. The neighborhoods provide access to opportunity? Does your neighborhood, ladies and gentlemen, the neighborhood, the streets, the street lights, the houses, do they provide access to opportunity? Or do you provide access to your neighborhood by taking advantage of opportunities and creating opportunities? This is sort of a quasi low-level Maoist policy. Oh, it is. Mao was a student, of course, of the Communist Manifesto and other writings of Marx and Engels. And so he forced the people in the city to move out into the agricultural areas. Many of them died, of course, millions, but, you know, that's the price other people pay for an ideology. You might have called them agrarians, as a matter of fact. Here, of course, in the United States, we have a form of this. It's just a softer form. So the government imposes... Let me ask you a question. Let's just step back. Do you think a single state, after the Constitution was adopted in 1787 in Philadelphia, do you think a single state would have ratified that Constitution if any of the members of the ratification conventions felt that the federal government was empowered to tell people where to live? No. That's how far we have sunk in this post-constitutional period. That's why I remind you every day that the Constitution belongs to us. It's our right. It's our heritage. That this country belongs to us. It's our right. It's our heritage. Because otherwise the world begins today, and we don't want it to begin today. We want it to begin with our founding governing document, which put in place limits to what HUD can do and what Obama can do and this guy Castro can do. But those firewalls have been and are being breached. This is why I say over and over and over again, we must elect a constitutional conservative. We must elect somebody who's not prepared to cut deals, but prepared to roll back. To roll back. Sometimes there aren't deals to cut. Not with people who are increasingly enemies and not merely adversaries. The units will be geographically dispersed in neighborhoods that have access to opportunity. The 46-page settlement includes a chart listing the 116 relatively affluent census tracts surrounding Baltimore City, where most of the 1,000 housing units must be located. At least 500 of the units must have 3 or more bedrooms to accommodate families with children, and at least one-third of the units must be accessible and made available to people with disabilities, and the housing units must be completed over a period of 12 years. Listen to this. Is this not Mao's China? Well, then what the hell is it? In addition, the county must provide 2,000 housing choice vouchers to help families gain access to higher opportunity neighborhoods. Listen to the language. Listen to these commies and their dictionaries and how they change everything. The county must, quote, proactively market the units to potential tenants who are least likely to apply, including African American families and families with a member who has a disability, unquote. I see. So you must discriminate in order to end discrimination. For opportunity neighborhoods. The county must, within 180 days, introduce and keep trying to pass legislation that prohibits housing discrimination based on a person's lawful source of income. So now, as I said, discrimination isn't merely based on race, ethnicity, genitalia, what you do with your genitalia, but the list is getting longer. Now it's based on income. Have you ever heard of anything so nuts in your life? Income. And ethnic front groups and liberal front groups have standing to bring lawsuits now against the federal government. Against the states. And it goes to the federal government. And they work with the federal government in this inside-outside ploy where they force these settlements. And finally, under the settlement agreement, the county must pay $150,000 to 3 individuals who complained to HUD in 2011. So you have a huge financial incentive out there to make complaints to the federal government that basically is an ambulance chaser. That is the federal government, an ambulance chaser looking for opportunities to enforce this rule that it created itself under the Fair Housing Act of the 1930s, which has nothing to do with any of this. Nothing. But it doesn't matter. We live in a post-constitutional society, a lawless society. In June 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that federal housing law allows people to challenge zoning laws and other housing practices that have a disparate or harmful impact on minority groups, even if there's no proof that the discrimination was intentional. The federal government doesn't have the constitutional or statutory authority to do this. They've taken the Fair Housing Act that was passed in the 1930s to prevent people from discriminating based on race. And they have bastardized the statute that's 80 years old to interpret it to mean income. I'm sick of the lawlessness. I'm just tired of these hacks on the left. I just am. I'm tired of it. Becky, Rye, New York, the great WABC. Go.
Mark, you really hit a chord. I live in a county that has gone through all of this, and I don't know if some of the listeners realize.
Remind them about Westchester, New York.
Well, it's a very similar suit as to what you went into with Baltimore. There was never any suit that accused any of the county from discrimination for someone who could afford a house but was denied because of their race, color, creed. So it's very similar to Baltimore. But the thing that's happening here, there are developments that are going for, let's say, the homes are going for $1 million. The people who are applying for the affordable units, they are getting $1 million homes way, way, way below market rates.
It's disgusting. It makes me sick to my stomach.
And I'm not sure what happened in Baltimore, but
let me just slow you down a second. Let's cut through all the crap, all the pretend that it's about race, all the pretend it's about income. Isn't this the Democrats taking care of their constituent groups? Isn't this the Democrats using the power of the law, the federal government, turning it on others, whatever the race, whatever the income, using it time and time again through programs they give clever names to and so forth to enrich their voters? Isn't that really what we're talking about, whether it's illegal aliens and in-state tuition, whether it's illegal aliens and Social Security, whether it is and getting jobs and so forth? All these laws, all these efforts, they're not really aimed at helping anybody. They're aimed at buying people, buying their votes, giving freebies. And isn't it funny, in a sick way, Becky, that it always helps the Democrat Party? Isn't it amazing?
Well, in addition to that, it is this tremendous transfer of wealth, and that's not from the upper classes. It's from the middle classes. Because if you live in any of these Westchester towns that are affected, if you are a middle-class person and you are not a minority or the designated group, you cannot apply for any of these affordable units. So if you are a Gold Star mom, if you're a veteran returning from war, if you're a widow, a divorcee, and you are not of a minority, but you are eligible just in terms of your income, your application will not even be accepted.
All right, Becky, appreciate your call. What's troubling me so much, and you too, folks, I know it is, we don't have a government that represents us. We have a government that takes from us our rights, our money, our housing, and everything else. They're not interested in equality. They're interested in you and I subsidizing potential Democrat voters and Democrat constituent groups. Let's be honest about this. I'm going to be absolutely straightforward about this. Is there a government policy out there that helps Republicans, conservatives? The entire government now operates for people who, don't have money, don't have jobs. Now, whether they have money or jobs, or don't rather, as a result of their own conduct or whatever, I'm just making a point. And then what parts of our society are punished by the government? The military, the cops, the so-called middle class, the so-called rich. Well, Mark, look how much the rich make. I'm not talking about how much the rich make. The government's focus is on subsidizing, supporting Democrats for the most part. Democrats. or Obama and his henchmen wouldn't be doing any of this, now would they? In addition to all the other obvious factors. The Westchester County, New York executive, his name is Rob Astorino. And Westchester County was the first county that was nationalized by HUD, in which they were forced to subsidize and put, quote-unquote, low-income housing based on opportunity costs. Now, I talked about this at great length yesterday, what they're trying to do outside of Baltimore, in Baltimore County. Well, Rob Astorino heard us, the Westchester County executive, and he said, you know what? That's been going on here, and we're duking it out. Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. Now, tell the worldwide audience here, and we've talked about this before a few years back. Tell the worldwide audience here what happened to your community.
Well, you were talking about it last night about Baltimore County now being roped in by the federal government. And we were the canary in the coal mine, and I've been saying this since I took office in January of 2010. I inherited a settlement that Westchester, my Democratic predecessor, agreed to with HUD. And at the time, the Assistant Secretary of HUD called it the Grand Experiment. Well, he is now, and they are now taking this nationwide, and what they're doing is they are linking, in their view, discrimination that, quite frankly, does not exist, that we have found or that they have claimed, but they have not backed it up, that they equate discrimination, segregation, et cetera, with zoning. And let me be clear, discrimination will not be tolerated, not in Westchester, and there's laws against that going back to the 60s and housing discrimination, et cetera. But zoning and discrimination are not the same thing. Zoning permits or prohibits what can be built and where, not who lives there. What HUD is doing is through statistics, if one community or one county is statistically too white for HUD's liking, what they do then is come in or can come in and say, we don't like the makeup of your community. Obviously, segregation and discrimination exists with no facts to back it up or no proof. And so you need to do this, the other thing, including they take away federal grants. They may bring in the Department of Justice to sue communities. And so this is what we're dealing with. And, Mark, I got to tell you, the founders of our nation understood that successful governance in a democracy absolutely depends on the consent of the governed. And in return for the people's consent, the founders then set limits on government, and that's why we got checks and balances to control the use of power. But right now what we have is a runaway regulatory dictatorship in Washington and social engineering, and they're doing it through intimidation. They're doing it through attacks on people's, character. My county, Westchester, which is the northern suburb of New York, we border New York City. Hillary Clinton lives in Westchester County in Chappaqua.
Congratulations.
Well, in many ways, I'd like to keep her living in the county for the following 8 years, so she's not living in the White House. But Hillary Clinton lives here, and Westchester and her town, the town of Newcastle, which also is the home of Andrew Cuomo, the governor and former HUD secretary. This is the epicenter of the battle that HUD is accusing Westchester and her town of being discriminatory and segregated. Now, people can go to my website, robastorino.com, and just scroll down a little bit. There's a news report that Fox did last year. I stood outside Hillary Clinton's home, and I demanded her to come outside, and she was home, to come outside and say, for the record, whether she believes that the town and county she lives in, which is under assault by HUD, is discriminatory. And if it is, then why is she living there? And if it's not, then why isn't she speaking out against these policies, which are now going national? And thankfully, there's some in Congress, Peter King of New York, Paul Gosar from Arizona, and others who are trying to defund HUD and their regulations that are spreading across the country.
Where does it stand now with Westchester County and the federal Leviathan?
Well, the settlement requires the county to build, similarly to what Baltimore County is going through now, we have to build 750 units of, by HUD's definition, low-income housing in 31 white communities based on the census of 2000, by the way. There's been a massive change in Westchester naturally in the last 16 years. Big increases in the Hispanic population and the African-American population. In fact, we're the fourth most diverse county in all of New York, believe it or not. And that's still not good enough for HUD. And so we are well ahead of...
Are you more diverse than Martha's Vineyard?
Yeah, most certainly we are. Yes, we are.
Are you more diverse than Aspen, Colorado?
Oh, absolutely.
Are you more diverse than, the community where Obama vacations in Hawaii?
Absolutely, and Vermont, which is 99% white.
That would be Bernie Sanders, as I recall.
That's correct.
No, you're wrong. It's 70% white and 30% translucent. Go right ahead.
Well, so what they're trying to do is attack and impugn and malign and intimidate, and we have pushed back and said, no. We'll do what's in that settlement, what's required, which was court-ordered, and a settlement agreed by my predecessor and HUD. But then they keep writing back to us along the way, trying to change unilaterally the settlement, forcing us to all of a sudden add 3 bedrooms and double the cost. And then they bring up this study by Rutgers from 15 years ago, which was never even adopted, which required 10,000 units of affordable housing.
Gee whiz.
And yeah, no, it's just crazy, nonsensical. And the monitor, who gets paid $1,050 an hour courtesy of the taxpayers of Westchester, and here's the kangaroo court that the rest of the country can start looking forward to, and Baltimore County, enjoy this. The monitor who worked for the Brennan Center for Justice is hired by HUD and can be fired by HUD. He serves at their pleasure, and yet he's supposed to be the referee. So now he's going after me personally.
Oh, really?
Yes, he is, and we're going.
The referee is going after you personally.
He's doing HUD's bidding, and so we're going back to court, and he's trying to silence me as an elected official in saying that I don't have the right under the settlement, which is insane. I don't have the right to react or speak up on behalf of the county or my constituents, which would be a dereliction of my duty if I didn't, warning people in the United States and warning people in Westchester of what HUD is trying to do unilaterally. And so, believe it or not, we have to go to court on this nonsense. But this is a major, major First Amendment issue.
All right, let me ask you this quickly because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
So your Democrat predecessor locked you into this deal. Were you able to pull out, or have you been able to go to court to undo any of this?
No, not undo it. And we have said, look, just let us finish this, and it should end up by the end of this year. But along the way, all they kept doing is adding new nonsense, harassing us, and trying to make us do far more than what's in the actual settlement. And that's where we have said absolutely not. They didn't expect us to fight back. We are. We're winning in federal courts, and we're not going to put up with it. And the reason why everyone in America needs to know this is because it is coming to your community or your county next, which is what we've warned. And now Baltimore, they did it in Marin County. They're doing it in other areas. And this is just social engineering. It's dictatorship. It's by fiat. And, you know, if Hillary Clinton gets elected, this absolutely will continue for another 4 or 8 years. And before you know it, the neighborhood you live in, which will not have zoning regulations because HUD thinks that height, density, acreage, even quarter acre.
Wealth.
Yeah. Is
all right, Rob, I got to go. If you have a website, if people want to hit it, what is it again?
RobAstorino.com, and go to the video and watch it. It'll tell you all about it.
RobAstorino.com. God bless you, my friend. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
All right.